Delpit, and it's all about cultural conflict in the classroom. And if y'all haven't read this book, which I assume y'all probably haven't, except Dr. Picado, of course, this is a great book. Like, it has changed my perspective on just like how to deal with cultural differences in classrooms and overall how to conduct a classroom. I highly recommend this book to anyone that's just going to have a diverse classroom, which is everybody in here. First I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lisa Delpit. Growing up, she grew up in the pre-integration Louisiana. Her mother was a black school teacher in an all-black school, and her father didn't say much about him, but he did get his degree. He didn't get like a diploma till he was 40 years old. And this is just a sad thing that happened. Another really sad thing about her dad is that he died at the age of 47 due to kidney failure. And if you have kidney failure, you can usually do dialysis and that will fix it. So this was a very preventable thing, but the problem was that the dialysis machine wasn't allowed to be used in the colored ward. So he ultimately died of racism because the white ward had one, they just wouldn't let him use it. Lisa Delpit was also amazingly among the first group of black students to be integrated into white schools, and she, just lived through all that. And so her education, she received her bachelor's in education from Antioch College in Ohio. After that, she went on to Philadelphia and taught for 6 years at a school which was 40% white and 60% black. After that, she decided to attend Harvard grad school to get her master's for curriculum, instruction, and research. She then traveled to Papua New Guinea on a fellowship with Harvard to do research with the local government about how the school systems worked, and also for her own research, which a lot of that influences a lot of what she wrote in her book. She served on the CORBE, which is Commission for Research in Black Education. She has worked as a professor at Georgia State University and has also been a professor at Florida International University College of Education. So critiques on Delpit, there aren't that many I could really find, because she's kind of amazing. She knows what she's talking about. She's done so much research, and just what she says is just so backed up by interviews from so many different teachers. Like, half of this book is just interviews with other teachers. And so if I could give one critique, it's just that she's always talking about how to teach elementary schools, which she only taught for 6 years at once. So of course that's not mastery level, but I mean, she's still really amazing at what she does. All right, so in Delpit's book, she goes over about 4 main concepts. The first is that a culture of power exists in schools. This culture of power is not a good thing, but it must be recognized and transferred to students. Second, the codes of the culture of power are best learned in a stress-free, meaningful context. Third, we as teachers must value the opinions and contributions of teachers of color so that the school can work best. And 4, there is not one uniform correct way to teach a classroom. So, first concept, the culture of power. So the culture of power exists in society, therefore it exists in schools. This culture of power is not a good thing, it is just simply what is. So there are 5 things that are held to be true about the culture of power. 1, the issues of power are enacted in classrooms. 2, there are codes or rules of participating in that power. 3, the rules of the culture of power are a reflection of the rules of the culture of those who have power. So like children from middle-class homes tend to do better in school than those from non-middle-class homes, because the middle-class home is kind of what the culture of school revolves around, and that can reference back to Jill's talk yesterday. 4th, if you are not already a participant in the culture of power, being told explicitly the rules makes acquiring that power a lot easier. And then 5th, those of power are frequently least aware, or at least willing to acknowledge its existence, and those with less power are often most aware of its existence. And this can also go back to what Jill was talking about yesterday, how she showed the video of the trash can in front of the classroom, and they all threw it into the trash can, and the people most aware were the ones in the back, and it's kind of the same in that culture. The ones with the least power in the classroom are the most aware of it. So, with these 5 points being stated, many liberal educators believe that the sole goal of education is to make the student autonomous and develop who they are in the classroom with as little hindrances as possible. However, this is really only reasonable for children who already are a part of the culture of power and have internalized its codes. So, parents of color wish to see their children taught the codes of the culture of power so that they too can be successful. A really great example of this is that there was an outcry from the black community when white liberal educators were trying to force dialect readers into classrooms, which is where it would like translate things into the dialect of African American students, being like, oh, well, this way they can learn to read better, and then we'll go to standard English. But black community was really mad about this because they were just like, you are taking away the opportunity from my student to learn American Standard English, therefore dooming them to never learn the language of power. As one mother said, my kids know how to be black, you all teach them how to be successful in the white man's world. And then some educators just have this attitude that parents of color don't care because they're like, why aren't they teaching these things to their kids at home? And it's because they can't. They don't know the culture of power. They need the teachers to teach them that. So a really important thing to remember when speaking about the culture of power is that although we need to teach our kids the code of the culture of power and its vitality to success, we need to make sure the students realize this culture of power is not ideal and needs to be changed. This is not how things should be, it is simply how they are. All right, second concept that Delpit talks about is the codes of culture of power are best learned in stress-free and meaningful context. So Stephen Kreshon dubbed the term of an effective filter. This filter operates when effective conditions are not optimal, when the student is not motivated, doesn't identify with their speaker, or are anxious. And this can result in a mental block for the students, making it harder for them to learn a new language and or dialect. And so this is our job as teachers to make sure a student feels incredibly comfortable in their setting and are learning new dialects in a meaningful way. So how do we ensure this smooth transaction? One is to remember that a student's dialect is special and unique. Second, we need to give the students opportunities to positively practice the code of power in meaningful communication. I have examples of that, but we're going to cover that in the section of how to use all of this in the classroom. Ultimately, as teachers, we can only provide exposure and practice to the alternate form of the culture of power and let the students have the opportunity to practice these codes in a culture that is safe, purposeful, and enjoyable. A third concept is we all must value the opinions and contributions of teachers of color. And guys, this is probably the most important one. Like, it honestly breaks my heart to read some of the interviews that Delpit had with other teachers of color in the classrooms, because they were just saying, like, when I go into conference meetings, they look at me, but they don't listen. They don't hear me. They don't hear what I have to say. They listen to me for about 10 minutes and then kind of dismiss what I have to say, because, like this book says, white people know everything, pretty much. She just gives accounts of different teachers and just their frustrations, and the main point is we need to listen to black teachers because they know how to teach black students. Another thing she points out is just like research and reading isn't always the best on how to conduct a classroom. You need to conduct your classroom based on your students, not research that's been done in other classrooms, because no classroom is the same. So Delpit interviewed a group of black teachers and other teachers of color, and they had a couple of important points to make. One, their experiences were not validated in teaching programs or their teaching lives. So they felt that university professors and students only wanted them to do research and read research that other white people wrote about how to teach white people's children, pretty much. The teachers interviewed also encountered negative and stereotypical cultural and racial attitudes directed towards themselves and toward ethnic minority children during teacher education and during their teaching lives. And when you think about this, what is the result of this bias? Well, something I thought was very interesting that this book said is there is a large number of non-white teachers who are certified but aren't teaching. And this is because of the bias they find in schools. So either they get out of the teaching program and they're just like, I can't deal with this bias. Like, this is not how the world's supposed to work, so they leave. Or they work for a long time and they just realize this isn't worth it, nothing's changing, so they quit. So not only are children affected by how we uplift culture and how we demote culture, but the teachers are affected, and that in turn affects the children. And just to fix this problem, we need to work with other teachers and break down that barrier. So a good example of my own life is more of an analogy. It's not really in the school system, but I went to a conference last fall that focused on racial reconciliation within the church. The church is a place that is said in the Bible that it needs to represent different cultures and be one. But as you can walk into a lot of churches now, and they're pretty all one color. And that's something that's just kind of really sad about the church today, is that it's not very diverse. But some churches have noticed this, and they are striving to mend this and to break down the barriers. And that's what this conference that I went to was all about. And we all just sat in a circle, got to know each other, found out about each other's backgrounds, and just became friends with each other, and just like were honest with how we felt and our opinions on things. But my big point from this example is that the church knew that we needed to go inside and fix the problem there before we could go out. And that's what we need to do with our teachers. We can't teach students unless all of the teachers are on the same page. So a solution, break the barriers by communicating with other teachers, because no change can happen in the school if teachers are not on the same page. The best way to unify the classroom is by having a diverse staff. And this can only work when we all respect each other's language, cultural background, and opinions. And hopefully from this, students will see this and want to be teachers. You know, because it says in this book that a lot of black teachers, they didn't want to teach their children the way they were taught. And instead of like having teachers become teachers in spite of what they learned, we need to inspire them to look at their teacher and be like, I want to do what she does. I want to do what he does, because he's inspiring me. He's helping me to succeed. That's what we need in our classrooms. All right, the last concept that she focuses on is there is not one uniform, correct way to teach a classroom. Delta taught school for 6 years in an elementary school in Philadelphia. They're 60% white, 60% black, 40% white. And she noticed that she constructed her classroom as an open classroom, free for creative thinking, not very much structure, kind of let the students lead the classroom, which is really great. But while she was doing this, the black students were kind of